Hi YouTube, it's Kathy, and this is my weekly entertainment wrap-up for January 24th through 30th. This week I read 3 books, I watched 6 shows, I watched 2 movies, and I listened to 2 books. The first book I finished this week was How Poetry Can Change Your Heart. This is a very short book basically telling you about the greatness of reading poetry and how it's wonderful. And if you're ever feeling like it's one of those mediums that's only for certain types of people, it's not. This wasn't exactly my cup of tea, partly because at the beginning it was very technophobic and it was talking about people reading on their phones, which was ironic because I was reading it on my phone. In addition, every time it talked about how poetry specifically is a thing that people should read, I really just was able to translate it to just reading in general, and it didn't really hone in on why I should read poetry of all things. I'm not saying this as somebody who's against poetry. I'm not against poetry. It is an interesting medium. There's a lot you can do with it, but this book didn't really hit its mark of making me really want to read poetry. Next I read Scavenger Hunt by Christopher Pike. This is another one of those books that I picked up for super cheap from my childhood, and it was just as cheesy as I expected it to be. This one starts out with our protagonist Carl waking up on the day where there's going to be a scavenger hunt at school, and he gets drafted into one team, but another team also wanted him because there's somebody on that team that's attracted to him, and then suddenly they are in competition to go on this scavenger hunt, and of course because it's Christopher Pike and it's weird teenage horror from the 80s, it goes completely sideways at some point. What I will say about this is I didn't exactly see the twist coming. Like, I knew that certain people were going to be evil and that type of thing, but I didn't understand what type of evil they were until it was revealed on the page. So that was interesting. Of course, this comes with a whole slew of trigger warnings. There's violence, there's anti-indigenous sentiment at one point, there's fat phobia probably. I can't remember exactly an instance of it, but I'm sure it was in there because his books tend to be. So again, reading these for nostalgia and to laugh at them more so than thinking that they're great literature. The final physical book I read this week was Cinder and Ella. This, as you might be able to guess, is a Cinderella retelling. However, it takes place in modern day Hollywood and Boston. Because these two characters are internet friends, Ella runs a blog where she reviews movies, and Cinder actually lives in Hollywood, and all she really knows about him is like his dad has a high-paying job and he dates a lot of supermodels, that type of thing. On her 18th birthday, she's in the car with her mother, who is her other best friend besides Cinder, and they are on the way to celebrate her birthday, and they are in a car crash that proves fatal for her mother and proves pretty bad for her because she is burned on 70% of her body, and the doctors originally don't think she's going to be able to walk again. Meanwhile, Cinder in Hollywood is a high-paid actor, and because their conversation cut off abruptly, he thought maybe her phone just died. And then when he doesn't hear from her for weeks, he's figured the worst. Either she never wants to talk to him again, or she has actually died. They don't have any way to contact each other besides online. They've never talked on the phone before. They just email back and forth and send instant messages. Her recovery takes a really, really long time, but by the time she gets out of the hospital, her estranged father has taken her in, and her estranged father also lives in Los Angeles. So suddenly they're now geographically in the same place, but they still haven't met, and there's this whole, should we change the dynamic of our relationship? Each of them is obviously already in love with each other. This had a surprising amount of depth to it. There are trigger warnings for ableism, both internal and external, as well as bullying. There is some very harsh bullying in this to do with Ella's condition. But overall, I thoroughly enjoyed this retelling. I felt it was done really, really well, and there was a lot of emotion to it. It made me cry at some points. So highly recommended if retellings are your thing. On to the shows we watched. I watched all of the episodes of Bridgerton because everybody else had watched it, so why shouldn't I? I originally didn't want to watch this because all I knew about the author of the books is that she once was on a romance panel and was asked why she doesn't have more diversity in her books, and she said it's because she wants to write happy books, which made me go, well, I'm never watching that adaptation. However, I realized that it was Shondaland, and I realized that there was going to be some more diversity included into the cast, so I decided that I could watch it. There was more diversity. It wasn't done super, super progressively or super, super well. There's actually an entire video essay, I can't remember the name of the lass who did it, that was done very, very well and actually articulated a lot of the points that I thought about the show or were kind of brewing in the back of my mind, but I couldn't figure out exactly how to express them. So I will link that down below because she said everything that I would say, but she had a lot more time to do it because she wasn't doing it in a weekly wrap-up. Next, we also watched all 10 episodes of Space Force. This is a show that my roommates had started watching before, got to the 7th or 8th episode, and then forgot to keep watching it, and because they started it without me, I hadn't seen it before, so we watched it all the way through. This stars Steve Carell as the 4-star general and the leader of Space Force, which is like the Air Force or the Marines, but they are going to go to space because the president tweeted out one day that he wants boots on the moon by 2024. He actually wrote boobs on the moon, but they decided that was a typo. As you might guess, considering it's starring Steve Carell, this had a lot of comedy to it. It also had a few characters that I had previously seen on Harmon Quest, so it was really cool to see them again in something like this. And overall, it ended in a very interesting way, so I'm excited to see if it gets another season, whenever that might be, because of the state of the world, and how they're going to resolve the situation from the end of that season. This is really the week for watching the entire seasons of things because we also watched the entire 2nd season of The Umbrella Academy. I can't really say anything about this season if you haven't seen the 1st season because so many things happen, and just talking about the dynamics of it feels kind of like a spoiler. If you've seen to the end of the 1st season and you remember how it wrapped up and what they decided to do at that point, that becomes even more of a talking point over this season. This season was set in a very interesting time and place, and they had a lot to say, and I can't really go into it because so many spoilers. This show, you can't just talk about it without all the context. I also watched this week's episode of RuPaul's Drag Race UK. This is a lot of fun. If you know me, if I'm watching 2 seasons of the same type of show, I will get contestants confused and kind of smush them around, especially when we're still at the bigger part of the cast. Once we whittle down the seasons, it'll be a lot easier for me to remember who is on which show. But I find, especially because not only do we see contestants in their boy form in their confessionals, but we also see them in all these different costumings throughout the show, that it is really difficult for me to pinpoint this is one complete person and they are on this show. That being said, obviously I'm very much enjoying this season. That leads into, of course, watching the 13th season of RuPaul's Drag Race, which again, big things are happening. They're finally starting to vote people off in this one. It's very interesting to see people getting snipey at each other because some people are definitely doing that. And I thought this week's challenge was really cool. We then, of course, watched a few random episodes of Bones. Basically, my roommate will be like, Kathy, pick a number between 1 and 12, and then Chad, pick a number between 1 and 24, and we'll watch whatever that episode is because we don't want to get super drawn into something and watch an entire season, like I did with literally 3 other shows this week. As for the movies we watched, we wanted some 90s nostalgia, apparently, so we watched the 1997 classic Spice World, which I had forgotten how absolutely ridiculous that movie is. It is super ridiculous, but it's trying to be ridiculous, and I really loved that. Also, if you watched it only as a child and never noticed that the inside of their bus is way larger than it should be because it's basically a TARDIS bus, that was a whole thing. Because Alan Cumming is in this, and he's obviously delightful, the next thing we watched was Josie and the Pussycats because he plays managers in both of them. That movie, also ridiculous. So much product placement. But they also laughed at that all the time. This was also a ridiculous movie, and we made a drinking game out of drinking when we saw product placement, so the plot isn't the most clear in my mind, but it was fun to revisit. I'm always a fan of going back and looking at super young Rosario Dawson because, wow, she is so little in this movie. On to the books I listened to this week, the first one being I'm Still Here by Austen Channing Brown. This is a book that I've had on hold for ages because it was recommended by Mari from My Name is Mari Inez, and it is a super excellent first account resource of what it's like to be a Black woman trying to work in corporate America. This book also starts out with an explanation of her name because Austen is traditionally a male name and traditionally a white male name, and her parents specifically did that because it was actually her grandmother's surname, I believe, and then they wanted her to be able to get into the interviews that they knew that she was going to have when she grew up, so they gave her this traditionally male white name to get her further in life, which kudos to them. This is another memoir that is read by the author, and I thoroughly enjoyed her discussions of what it's like to work in the workplace and have people completely talk over you as though you're not there because they don't see you as the boss because of what you look like. The other book I listened to this week was Hench, and it was so good. I really loved this book. Hench is about this woman who works at a temp agency for people who are henches, which are the people that work under supervillains. So she'll get job placements to go and do data work, which is what she specializes in. And she's on the job one day when things go completely sideways. She gets injured and she is not covered in any way. She doesn't have medical. So she starts thinking to herself about superheroes and how much damage they're actually doing to the world. Because she wasn't injured by a supervillain, she was injured by a superhero. So she starts crunching the math on it and basically goes on a tirade to get superheroes wiped out because they're actually doing way more harm than they are good. That is the super short form of what this book is. It gets so much deeper into this topic and there are so many complex and interesting characters into it. Our main character is also bi, so I thought I'd throw that out there because there's a challenge going around about reading queer books and there's a bingo board and one of them is superheroes. This is a perfect thing to read to knock that off your list. This is one of those books that I think I'm going to be thinking about it so much and so often I might have to get my own copy because this was thoroughly enjoyable. That's it for this week. If you've read, watched, or listened to any of these, let me know about it down in the comments below. On the way down to the comments, if you hit that subscribe button, that would be very nice of you. If you don't feel like leaving a comment but want to make sure that I know you were here, just leave me an emoji or a smiley face if you're on your keyboard. Some people have asked if there's a way to financially support this channel, so I set up a Ko-fi account, which is a digital tipping service. The link for that is down below, as well as the link to my PayPal and my Amazon wishlist in case you would like to buy me a book. You can like and share this as you see fit, and I will see you very soon. Bye!